So we're continuing with Hopper's New York today. We are starting with the section City and Print. I'm quite interested in this because while the other book made some brief mention of this period of his life, it really wasn't touched upon in that book. Although Hopper aspired to be recognition as a painter, his first successes came in print through his etchings and illustrations. Notably, the images he made for these reproducible formats consolidated many of the elements that would characterize Hopper's vision of New York. Emptied spaces defined by architectural elements, dramatic use of light and shadow, obliquely implied narratives. From 1915, to 1923 and briefly in 1928, Hopper forged a printmaking practice in which he deepened the exploration of urban themes, casting street corners at night, seamstresses in windows, and elevated train cars as his subjects. For Hopper, the creative possibilities of the print medium were boundless and offered total artistic freedom, which he did not have in his commercial work. He began to exhibit, sell, and publish his prints regularly, and for his Washington Square North studio where he moved in 1913, he purchased an etching press that would become a permanent fixture in the space. When Hopper entered the illustration field around 1906, taking an advertising job with Coles Phillips, a former classmate and soon-to-be famed illustrator, New York, had established itself as the advertising and publishing center of the United States. Hopper found a steady flow of assignments from major firms, as well as popular magazines and journals that supported his fine art practice and offered him an opportunity to experiment with New York motifs and a range of new compositional strategies and artworks for illustrations, such as a theater entrance or New York and its houses. Hopper took inspiration from urban architecture, theaters, restaurants, and city dwellers, subjects that became foundational to his mature practice. Night Shadows, 1921. There you can see a dedication to his wife. Plate 23, A Corner. Plate 24, Night in a Park. These are 1919 and 1921. Open Window, 1918 to 19. Evening Wind, 1921. And at the bottom is East Side Interior, 1922. On top, we have the L Station, 1919 to 23. This reminds me, I don't know why, of that early Tom Cruise movie, Risky Business, but it's Night on the L Train, 1918. And we have Housetops, 1921. Now it looks like we're getting into more of his illustrations and drawings in a restaurant between 1916 to 25. At the theater, 1916 to 22. At the bottom, we have illustration for H. Addington Bruce. What trivial doubts can you do? Every week for April 16th, 1917. Have Boy and Me, which was done 1906 to 1907, and a theater entrance, 1906 and 1910. So these are, it's like for some company publication. Not sure, it's an interesting cover for what looks like a journal on houses, or probably the first page of an article that does not look like someone you'd want visiting. But that is from 1906 to 1910. Bricklayer's Coffee Break, 1907 to 1910. Hopper lived and worked at Washington Square North in Greenwich Village from 1913 until his death in 1967. During his first 2 decades there, he often turned to immediate environs for inspiration. His rooftop pictures, which include a group of New York watercolors, the early dry point on my roof, and the painting City Roofs, reveal how profoundly attuned he was to the spatial dynamics and subtleties of the city's built environment. Starting with the spaces most familiar to him after Edward married the artist Josephine Verstill Nivison in 1924, the two resided in Edward's top floor, one-room studio until 1932, when they moved across the hall to a larger space facing Washington Square Park. Through their front windows, the Hopper could view the buildings surrounding the park, including Judson Memorial Church with its 10-story campanile, and the adjacent 19th century structures to the south, as well as the looming towers beyond, all of which appear in Edwards Washington Square scenes from the 1920s and 1930s. The cityscapes of the time thematized the variety of architectural types and styles that created the urban fabric of the growing city. Inside their new apartment, Jo had a dedicated space to work on her art, and she often depicted subjects around the studio, such as the stove and fireplace, and Edward working at his easel. Edward, in turn, captured Jo in numerous sketches, often in quiet moments, absorbed in reading or writing. Jo also played a crucial role in Edward's practice as his longtime model and chief record keeper. Edward's and Jo's close partnership, albeit a difficult and sometimes volatile one, was deeply rooted in their affection for their New York studio and home, and throughout their many decades on the square, they advocated for the preservation of the neighborhood as a haven for artists. So we have, I believe this is one we saw in the other book, The City. Here we have skyline near Washington Square on top and rooftops below. Roofs, Washington Square, 1926, and My Roof, 1928. Skylights, 1926 on top and on my roof. Which looks pretty similar to the painting. So, I don't know why it's making me think of this, but for any of you who play Tactics Advance, remember the opening in that town. Although it's, maybe it's just the colors. It's really making me think of this. Although that's very much more a small town kind of feeling. South of Washington Square, 1915, and Town Square, Washington Square and Judson Tower, 1932, on the bottom. Study for the City, 1927, and below, Study of the Upper Stories of 82nd Washington Square East, 1928. Oh yeah, this one actually looks like that same feeling where is it Marsh? Where Marsh's father is confronted by his two co-workers outside the bar. November, Washington Square. Oil on Canvas, 1932 / 1959. Oh, so it looks like we have more of Josephine's paintings here on this left page. Back of Edward Hopper. Stove and fireplace. And Washington Square Park, which these look like they're all 1930. Now I believe we are back to his work as all of the paintings not by someone else do not have no attribution. Oh yeah, so you can see the signature there. And it looks like it's got another dedication to Josephine. And it looks like we have 3 different drawings of Josephine there. The top from 1935 to 40, the bottom left from 1924 to 30. In the bottom right, 1945 to 50. And another portrait of her, and then another self-portrait from later in his life. I think that's the. I guess I never realized that was a self-portrait. Uh, but I guess that's the one I'm familiar with, not that younger one you saw earlier. So it's interesting that they were involved with this because I've recently been watching a lot of sort of urbanist channels lately, like City Beautiful, and I think it's City Beautiful that have the one between Jacobs and Moses, and they really got into the heart of all this, and that's quite interesting that him and Joe were also at the center of just stopping the old city getting torn down. Manhattan Bridge Loop, 1928. Manhattan Bridge on top, 1925, and Lilly Apartments are on the bottom. Another of Manhattan Bridge from 1925 to 1926, and Manhattan Bridge entrance, 1926. This is a view from Williamsburg Bridge, 1928. Oh no, it does say oil. It's a much different coloration than most of his paintings. At first glance, I would have thought it was a watercolor, and that's just really great, interesting texture on that water. McCombs Dam Bridge, 1935. This is one I think everyone is also familiar with. They had mentioned it quite a few times earlier this book, I believe. But it's early Sunday morning, 1930. Apartment houses, East River, 1930. I guess, I'm curious what the reasoning is. It's like, as a reader, it's pretty jarring to have all these blank pages. I wonder, I'm considering, it's either, well, must be some technical limitations that I'm unaware of, or B, perhaps these were placeholder pages and they failed to secure the rights for whatever piece they were planning and then just left. I don't know. The third thing I'm thinking of offhand is just that because like when these are bound, don't they bind sheaths at a time? So I wonder if these are like the last page of sheath getting bound. Houses at Dusk, 1935. Did we? I think we saw a preparatory sketch for this one. So I think that's why it looks familiar, yeah, because it was talking about how, you know, that wall just blocks off the bottom. Yeah, I do actually really like that one. The window. Hopper spent hours strolling the sidewalks, riding the elevated trains, attending the theater, and patronizing New York's eating establishments. Always on the lookout for potential subjects, he was particularly drawn. Um, yeah, I bet you he's that Violet one's favorite artist. The boundaries between public and private spaces in a city were all aspects of everyday life, from goods in a shopping window to intimate and unguarded moments in a cafe or inside one's own living room are equally on display. The window became one of Hopper's most enduring symbols, and he exploited its potential to merge the urban facades that had long fascinated him with views into the private lives lived within. In a 1928 essay he wrote for his friend and fellow painter, Charles Birchfield, Hopper emphasized an aspect of Birchfield's work that is also applicable to his own: the shared interest in capturing the interior and exterior of a building seen simultaneously. A common visual sensation, he remarked. Works such as Automat. You know, so I know I've seen that one, but I don't remember seeing it in the landscape book, and so I'm not sure unless I've actually just seen the painting. I thought I could have sworn it was in that other book because I remember looking it up and being fascinated by what they were. Because although I've seen them in some golden age movies now, I was very unfamiliar with that. And it seems wild to me because you have a lot of restaurants now trying to get back to that concept, but it was already existing in the 1920s and 30s. For those who are unaware of what one is, an automat is basically, um, I'm not sure if they are all entirely extinct, but from uh, what I'm aware of, they started falling out of fashion and it pretty much died off as a concept as in the 50s or 60s. But I'm sure it's possible you could find some on the East Coast where they were most prevalent. But it's a sort of I think they'd have actually. Oh yeah. No, I guess I don't remember seeing it, but the concept is that I guess you would have seating in them, but that all the food is locked up. It's I guess I mean, it must have been prepared on site, but it would just be, you would come in, they would have the food behind these glass uh, openings in the wall covered by glass. You would, you know, put quarters or whatever in, and just get your food. And Room in Brooklyn highlight Hopper's seamless shifting between interior and exterior. In night windows and tables for ladies, he imagines the unlimited compositional narrative possibility of the city's windowed facades, the potential for looking and being looked at, and the discomfiting awareness of being alone in a crowd that had become synonymous with modern life. Office at Night, 1940. New York, interior, 1921. Girl at a Sewing Machine, 1921. Well, today I've been really pleasantly surprised by what this book had to offer. I might have to take back some of my earlier negative opinions. It's really opened up, and I still have quite a lot left to go. Hoping to get through enough that we should be able to comfortably finish it tomorrow. Oh yeah, and I believe everyone should be familiar with this one. New York Pavements, 1924 to 1925. Tables for Ladies, 1930. I feel like this is another one that quite familiar with, but I'm not sure where I would have seen it because I'm sure it wasn't in that other one. And then we're back to the Automat. I do just really like this one, so that's why we're revisiting it. And this is Rome and Brooklyn. Then they republished that drugstore one we saw earlier. Night Windows, 1928. Room in New York, 1932. Theater. Hopper was passionate about the theater, and his work underscores the critical role it played as wellspring of visual inspiration. He and Joe frequently attended theatrical productions and movies at venues across the city, from their local Sheridan Theater to those clustered in Times Square's growing theater district. Hopper's interest in the theater surely influenced his stage-like compositions as well as his paintings of the city at night, in which illuminated interiors seen from the darkened spaces of the street or sidewalk are transformed into a type of urban spectacle. Hopper also took interest in the interiors of theaters, often sketching architectural elements such as the proscenium, the electric lighting, and the seating and orchestra pit during the transitional moments before and after the productions. He thematized one such liminal period in his first major painting of a theater interior, Two on the Aisle. While in New York Movie, he relied on numerous sketches of distinct New York venues, including the Globe, the Palace, the Republic, and the Strand, to create one of his most ambitious composites of real and imagined spaces. A number of Hopper's preparatory studies for paintings depict Jo, who by this time had taken on an active role as his sole model, for which she often dressed in character and helped source props. The Hopper's collaborative scene staging was integral to his painting process. The Balcony, 1928. Two on the Aisle, 1927. New York Movie, 1939. The Sheridan Theater, 1937. Oh, and this one is his. I've been looking forward to it ever since I heard it mentioned. The two comedians, or two comedians, I should say, 1966, which was his final painting. So on here, on the left, we have the study for Shakespeare at Dusk. And then Shakespeare at Dusk, 1935. Oh, and here we are also revisited by quite a striking painting from the last book. So, in seeing these studies, although there were a few interesting ones, oh, yeah, I will be going ahead and wrapping this up today. From the mid-1940s to the 1960s, Hopper produced a group of ambitious paintings characterized by radically simplified geometry and uncanny, dreamlike settings. These works were inspired by New York scenes but depart from specific references to morph into ambiguous spaces of mystery, anticipation, and anxiety. In a journal from this period, Hopper describes his aim in painting as creating a realistic art from which fantasy can grow. Yeah, we've heard that quote a few times before. At a moment when many artists in New York had turned to abstraction, Hopper pushed this concept further than ever before through psychologically charged images of cafeterias, theaters, offices, and bedrooms. Hopper's late work often incorporate solitary figures or small groups set in surreal constructions inspired by urban architectural typologies, a brownstone abutting a public park, a cafeteria overlooking another building facade, but rendered as stage composites. During this time, Hopper focused on one of his most iconic subjects, a solitary woman gazing out of an apartment window. While he had explored the window as a device for dramatizing the dynamics of display within the urban environment in paintings such as Morning Sun and Morning in a City, the private interior serves as a vantage for looking out at the city and slice of row houses seen through the window functions as a generalized urban landscape, a theatrical backdrop against which the dramas of the city can be observed. This is one we saw as well. Yeah, that's another fairly well-known one, I believe, and I believe that was in our last book. August in the City, 1945. I'm guessing that's a reference to the fact that New York becomes notoriously unbearably hot, and so the city is usually, anyone who has the means to can summer elsewhere and do. Given the quite opulent nature of that mansion, that seems to be most likely the case. Morning Sun, 1952. City Sunlight, 1954. New York Office, 1962. I believe these are, because we haven't in either book seen too many, which I believe he was not very prolific during that time period, but we had not seen, I don't think we saw any in the last book from the 60s, and only maybe one from the 50s. No, this wasn't the last book, so I guess we did see at least one. Intermission, 1963. And that is where we will end this book. So overall, I guess taken on its own merits, it probably succeeded in accomplishing its aim. It just really was not what I personally was looking for. So if you're just wanting, a pretty book with some light context for your coffee table, this is definitely not it. Also have to say the construction of this book for its high price point is quite shoddy. As you can see, you've got it's because here it's pulling away on that binding is just very shoddy. So it's just warped the covers and in this short time, and I really don't see how I mean, he obviously retorted it's because I've been dragging it around places, but I really don't see how that would be the case since I've never had anything like it happen before. But that will conclude today. We will most likely, well, I might do an opening tomorrow. I'll probably do an opening tomorrow. We'll do another 2 chapters of Inversions tonight, and then we'll start Monster Hearts on Saturday.